Today's guest is Robert Schwartz, certified hypnotist specializing and a facilitator of Between Lives Soul Regressions, BLSRs or BLRSRS small s, to help people heal, resolve life issues, and understand their life plan. He is an author of numerous books: Your Soul's Gift, Your Soul's Love, and Your Soul's Plan. Robert has been searching fruitlessly for the deeper meaning of life. His mission is to make available to as many people as possible empowering, healing information about pre-birth planning and the planning of life's challenges. Okay, welcome, Rob.
Thank you. Good to be here with you again, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, as we go through life, some people remain stuck in a specific mindset of holding onto a handrail and keeping whatever they know in the same pattern in which they know something. And then there are others who have a breakthrough and somehow the nut is cracked open, and then the realm of deeper understanding of going into that certain rabbit hole, so to speak, of information is endless. Maybe you could just share with the audience of where your journey began and how you got into the work you do now.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I was in the corporate world for a number of years. I have an MBA. I was self-employed doing marketing and communications. Did not like that work at all. Had this nagging sense that I was supposed to be doing something else, but I didn't know what it was, and I wasn't sure how to figure out what it was. And then back in 2003, three very important things happened all within a couple months of each other. The first was I had my first session ever with a psychic medium. She started the session off by saying, "Your spirit guides are here." And I said, "What is a spirit guide?" I mean, I'd never even heard the term before. So she explained that. And then she said, "Your guides would like to speak directly with you." And she started to channel them. Right out of the box, they said to me, "You planned your life, including your biggest challenges, before you were born." And I'll tell you, I just shook my head and I said, "Well, why in the world would I have done that?" They said, "You did this for purposes of spiritual growth." They then launched into this very detailed and lengthy monologue in which they explained why I had planned all of my major challenges. And what was really compelling about this is that they knew what all of the challenges had been without me telling them anything about myself, nor had I told the medium anything prior to the session. So, as you can imagine, if you're talking to beings who know literally everything about you without you telling them anything, that gives them a lot of credibility. So, I came out of that session with my mind blown wide open. And for weeks afterward, I thought about this pre birth planning perspective. The effect that it had on me was that it really created quite a deep healing because it allowed me for the first time in my life to see deeper meaning and purpose to the most difficult things I had experienced. And then I thought, well, if this perspective can create that kind of feeling for me, surely it can create a similar kind of feeling for other people. That was when I first started to think about writing a book about pre-birth planning. Then, within a very short time of the session with the medium, I was introduced to a woman who has the ability to go into trance and channel her soul, her higher self. So I had the opportunity to spend about 15 hours speaking directly with this person's soul. And the soul told me in great detail all about pre-birth planning, how it's done, why we plan challenges. And that 15 hours of channeling really served as the foundation for all three books I later went on to write. And then the third and really the most impactful by far experience of the three, right around May, June of 2003, I was home alone in my apartment in Chicago where I lived at the time. It was the middle of a weekday afternoon, and I decided just to take a break from work and go for a walk. So I'm walking down the sidewalk in Chicago when all of a sudden I had what many people call a spiritually transformative experience, in which every time I looked at another person, this feeling of pure, overwhelming, unconditional love for that person washed over me.
Wow.
Now, I call it pure, overwhelming, unconditional love because those are the words closest to it in the English language. But really, there are no words that even begin to describe this. I could also call it a transcendent kind of love or divine love. It was something far beyond the human realm. It lasted only about an hour, but it completely changed everything I think about who I am and what life is all about. And I was caused to know you could say I was caused to know during this experience that we as souls are made literally from the energy of unconditional love. Now, what I didn't know at the time was why this was happening. That became clear a couple of years later. By that time, I had looked at many people's pre-birth plans for my first book, Your Soul's Plan. And what I found in every case, without exception, is that the pre-birth plan was based on complete unconditional love for every person involved. And this was true even when great challenges were being planned. This was true even when negative roles were being scripted for people. It was always based on complete unconditional love for every person involved. And then I realized, that experience walking down the sidewalk 2 years ago, that was gifted to me so that when I found this result in my research, I would be certain that what I was finding was true.
Yeah.
So the combination of those three things got me to say, okay, I'll leave the corporate world, start writing a book about pre-birth planning. It took 3 years on a full-time basis. And 3 years later, Your Soul's Plan came out. And now I have a completely new and much more fulfilling life.
Yeah, I would say that the breakthrough for many people is a dark soul of the night, or some type of suffering that takes place to, open a person up to actually even investigate or go deeper than where they're at. Uh, and so many people suffer, but they don't take that path. They fall into victim mindset and just keep evolving into a deeper hole of negativity. And yet the path of opening up to the spirit world and to the work you do is transcending, because it gives the opportunity for a person to open up their heart and feel that love like you did. Um, Maybe you could just speak a little bit about suffering in terms of like what the suffering does and how it can actually open you up if you do go up that path of enlightenment.
Sure.
Well,
Well, suffering is not caused by what we experience or what happens to us, but rather our resistance to those experiences. In other words, if you were an enlightened ascended master and you could experience absolutely anything with no resistance, then you would experience no suffering. But the vast majority of the human race is not at that level yet. And that's one of the reasons we're incarnating in the Earth School, is that's a step to getting there. So when you believe that you are a victim, you vibrate at the frequency of victim. And when you vibrate at the frequency of victim, you are energetically stating to the universe that you are a victim. Well, whatever energetic statement you make to the universe, it always responds in exactly the same way. It always responds by saying, yes, that's right, you are. So if you state energetically to the universe that you're a victim, it says, yes, you are a victim. And it brings you more experiences that seem to confirm on the surface that you are, in fact, a victim. The way to break out of that negative self-perpetuating cycle is to come into the awareness that you are the courageous and powerful soul who planned your challenges before you came into body. Once you know that, even if you don't know why you planned them, the simple knowledge that you planned your challenges will pull you out of victim consciousness. It's a huge developmental leap, and it's a huge leap in vibration. If you then come into some understanding of why you planned the challenges, that's even better, because then you can go about learning those underlying lessons in a much more conscious and much less painful manner. One of the main reasons we plan challenges for ourselves before we incarnate is to trigger the kind of spiritual awakening that we've been talking about since this conversation started.
yeah, there are people who have incarnation, who reincarnate and don't have the most traumatic experiences. They may lead a very subtle and peaceful life to some extent. Is there any truth to the fact that they may have had other experiences in past lives, that in this life it's more of a rest period or some type of rejuvenation? Or
There is something that I call a vacation lifetime. And it's not common, but it also isn't as rare as you might think. Probably everybody who will hear or see this conversation can think of at least one person they know who, at least on the surface, appears to be having a vacation lifetime.
right?
There are a couple of main reasons why a soul would plan a vacation lifetime. One would be as a reward to self for having done well in one or more past lives. The other main reason is that you simply had never had one before. The soul wants to experience everything. So if you had had only difficult incarnations, you would be likely at some point to plan a vacation lifetime simply to have that experience. You know, the people who are having vacation lifetimes, I think they serve a very important function for the rest of us, which is they say to us, this is what life on Earth can be like. Because if you think about it, if literally every person on the face of the planet were suffering tremendously, then we would conclude that life is suffering. And that, I think, would be a very unfortunate and inaccurate conclusion.
That's an excellent point. I mean, so many people compare themselves, but again, getting back to mindset of being a victim, that's usually when people are then comparing their lives to somebody else rather than taking the initiative of knowing that they have the power to control their own path. Um, Many people, as we speak, have heard of the things you're discussing, but there are people who have no idea of what happens or what the steps are when a person passes and what they do when they die and where they go and how they actually make this specific plan. And or the power we have over what we're going to choose to learn in the next reincarnate. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, the first thing I'll say there is that the last thought you have right before you die, right before you transition, is extremely important. It can set the theme or the tone for your next incarnation. So you want to be in as loving and positive a space as you possibly can be when you transition. After you leave the physical body, the average person moves through the tunnel of light that we've all heard about now through the accounts of people who had near-death experiences. As you're moving through the tunnel of light, as I understand it, it's important not to leave the tunnel. You can leave it at different points. What you want to do is go through the tunnel and all the way into the light as far as you can go. That puts you back on the other side, our non-physical home. You will be greeted by angels, masters, spiritual figures of significance to you, loved ones, friends, and so forth. What you first experience when you cross over is largely determined by what you believe you will experience. But if you believe something that is not supported by an eternal reality, like hell, for example, that experience doesn't continue. There's no eternal reality to sustain it. So even somebody who had a hellish transition would eventually move into a realm of love and peace and joy and light. Now, when you get back to the other side, everybody has a role there. And this role continues on during your time in the between lives state. For example, on the other side, I'm a counselor with a specialty in advising souls when they're at critical inflection points in their evolution. And if you think about the work I'm doing in this lifetime, that's the same kind of work here on the earth plane. So you would pick up with your role and continue with your work on the other side. And at some point, usually shortly after your transition, you'll have a life review. The life review is conducted with your spirit guides in an atmosphere of complete unconditional love and non-judgment. Essentially, you are using the life review to assess the degree to which you fulfilled your pre-birth intentions. Nobody will judge you in your life review except possibly you. Self-judgment is very common, but your guides won't judge you. There's no council that judges you. God does not judge you. If there's judgment at all, it's coming from you and only you. Now, if you judge yourself as having done poorly in some way, that's karma. It's a feeling of incompletion. And so you would then plan another lifetime to work more on whatever it is you felt you didn't master in the previous lifetime.
Okay, so each person is in a state of planning once they pass on or transition. Is there a specific amount of time that a person has to reincarnate, or can it be? Is there a minimum time or a maximum time?
Well, remember that in the non-physical realm that is our home, there is no time. So it's one eternal now moment. If you try to translate into Earth terms what that means, it's my understanding that the average person will reincarnate somewhere between 25 and 75 years later in linear time. But you don't have to come back at a point further along in linear time. When you're planning your life, it's like you've got a history book of the Earth in front of you. And this history book has literally no beginning and also no end. So you're flipping through the pages looking for the exact place in time space where you can best learn whatever lessons you want to learn. So that might mean you move forward 25 or 75 years. It might mean you go back in linear time 500 or 1,000 years. And there's the sequence of your incarnations is all over the place in terms of linear time.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, many people have their past life readings. I've had a past life reading, and then encountered people in this life who recognized me from the past life in two different accounts. So for me, it was a very interesting phenomenon in terms I speak about it in different interviews in terms of what happened as being a doctor in a concentration camp. And then doing healing, I do healing work. And then after the healing, the person would get up and say, I remember you from the concentration camp. And then the second person, the same thing exactly took place. And as I knew it prior to these two encounters, I personally had readings done, which exactly said that was my profession during 1940 to 1940, 45 or so. And so for me, trying to clear the remnants of that past life in this present life has been something very interesting for me to experience, and which has brought me to the interest of the work you do as well. So um, I do see in terms of why I planned or what I planned and how it relates to trying to work on specific things that I didn't or I was fearful in a past life or past lives. In terms of bringing the stuff into the present life, um, many times people think that when they live a life, they want to take the money and run. And then it's if you have the philosophy that once you die and once you're dead, then that's it. Then people don't work on the lessons possibly that they came here to work on. So how does if they did plan on having a past, if they had a if they planned on the new life and working on those issues, but then they skipped it or they forfeited working on it, what happens? Like, what does a person do?
Well, again, you would see in your life review that you had done that. And if you're receiving or hearing your guidance while you're in the incarnation, then you'll have at least an intuitive sense that you aren't doing what you came here to do. So hopefully you would get it corrected before you transition back into the non-physical realm. But the question that you just asked is one major focus of the form of hypnosis I practice, which is called a Between Lives Soul Regression. So what happens in a Between Lives Soul Regression, or BLSR for short, we start with some preliminary steps to help the client relax physically and mentally. Then I guide them into a past life. It's almost always a past life that had a big impact on the plan for the current lifetime. They experience several different scenes in the past life, the last of which is the death scene. The portion of the consciousness that is having the experience leaves the body in the death scene and crosses back over to the other side, which I realize might sound a little bit ominous, but there's actually nothing to it. It's very easy and gentle. When you get back to the other side, most likely you'll be greeted by a spirit guide. You'll talk to the guide briefly about the past life, and the guide will tell you what's important for you to know about that past life. And then your guide takes you to what is called your council of elders. These are the very wise, loving, and highly evolved beings who oversee your personal evolution. They know literally everything about you, everything about the plan for your current lifetime, and everything about every past life you've ever had. So when you get in front of your council, you can ask literally any question on any subject. And if it's for your highest good to know the answer, the council will answer it. Most people ask questions that get at what did I plan for this lifetime? Why did I make those plans? How am I doing in terms of fulfilling my plan? And how can I better fulfill my plan? So by the time you come out of your conversation with your council of elders, you should have pretty thorough answers to all four of those questions. People often comment on the overwhelming unconditional love their council has for them, and also the complete non-judgment of the council. And they'll say things like, I could tell that my council knew everything about me, including all the bad things I've done in this lifetime, but they loved me unconditionally anyway. And for the average person, that's their first experience of truly unconditional love since they came into body in this lifetime. So it's really a homecoming of sorts. It's a beautiful, beautiful experience, and often a transformative experience because it will tell you what you need to work on and how to go about working on those things for the rest of your incarnation.
How long does the session usually last, and like in terms of how does a person?
It's generally 2 hours. You can do it either as a private session, although there is a long wait to get an appointment, or if you prefer not to wait, you can do it in one of my online workshops. There's a 1-day workshop, a 2-day workshop. We do the group Between Lives regression in both the 1-day and the 2-day workshops. And it actually works just as well in a group as it does in a private session. It's not interactive. It can't be since it's a group, but everybody still gets individualized answers to their questions. And the way that happens is I prompt the whole group to ask a very long and extensive series of questions that covers all the major areas of their life. So by the time you're done asking all those questions, you will have a very good idea of what you planned, why, how you're doing, and how to do better.
Yeah. Are there certain common themes that we plan in terms of like maybe divorce, suicide? I mean, suicide's not a common type of planning, but it happens in terms of and why. Uh,
Well, in terms of themes, there are 5 main reasons why we plan challenges. And just to quickly list those, they're balancing and releasing karma, healing, service to others, experiencing contrast, which means on the earth plane experience things that are not love. And the 5th one is healing or correcting false feelings or false beliefs about oneself. The average life challenge has been planned for a combination of 2 or 3, or sometimes more of those 5 reasons. And a lot of the planning at the soul level, when we set up challenges, the themes have to do with qualities that are very important to the soul, that the soul wants the incarnate personality to cultivate and then express. I call these qualities divine virtues. And we do a divine virtues exercise in my 2-day online workshop that will tell you it's usually 2 or 3, the 2 or 3 divine virtues you're working on in this lifetime. When you were planning your biggest challenges, you viewed those challenges as providing both the opportunity and the motivation to cultivate the virtues. The virtues are things like unconditional love, patience, empathy, compassion, faith, trust, and so on. And this falls under the 3rd reason I listed for planning challenges, service to others. The connection there is that when you cultivate and express the divine virtues, you're raising your vibration. Your vibration is your primary form of service to others. This is true for literally every person who's incarnate on the planet, even people like me who have specific missions that require action on the physical plane. Your vibration is always far more important, far more impactful than any action you can ever take with your physical body. And again, you raise your vibration by cultivating and expressing the divine virtues.
yeah. So you speak about events in terms in our lives. They're neither random nor arbitrary, but rather a part of like a wisely conceived and intricate plan, as we've been talking. That's been bravely designed. And in terms of how we go about better understanding this, do we necessarily need to have a regression to have an inkling of what's happening, or we can go by some of our daily rituals of what we experience?
Well, I think prayer and meditation are major pillars of every spiritual path. I always say prayer and meditation will get you 80% of where you want to go. The other 20% is something that's unique to you, and you will have to figure out what that 20% is. It might be Between Lives regression, it might be something else. But if you are praying and asking to receive guidance, and if you meditate and quiet your mind, which is a great way to receive the guidance,
Right.
then you'll either hear your guides talking to you, or what would be a much more common experience is that you just have an intuitive knowing of what you are supposed to be doing here. It might not be crystal clear, it might not be black and white, but you have a general intuitive sense that this is the general direction I am to move in this lifetime. If you wanted to gain further insight into your life plan and how you're doing, in addition to doing a Between Lives regression, you could read any of my books, Your Soul's Plan, Your Soul's Gift, Your Soul's Love. Those are actually organized by type of life challenge. So you can go straight to whatever chapter applies most to you. And then do things like the Divine Virtues exercise. In the 2-day workshop, we do a contact a deceased loved one regression. people have an opportunity to talk with loved ones on the other side about their life plan with those people. So there are a lot of different ways of getting at this information.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more about the three books that you've written or other books, but the ones that I've mentioned already, with in terms of your soul's gift, your soul's love, and your soul's plan. Maybe just give a little example of what each one is about. So.
Well, Your Soul's Plan is the first in the series, and most likely the one that I would recommend for the average person if they're just starting to read on this subject. In Your Soul's Plan, there are chapters about the pre-birth planning of physical illness, alcoholism, drug addiction, uh, poverty, accidents, and so forth. Your Soul's Gift is the second book in the series. That book goes into greater depth than Your Soul's Plan, and it also covers some very sensitive and challenging ground. There's a chapter about the pre-birth planning of rape, and there's a chapter about the pre-birth planning of incest. Those are difficult subjects chapter in the context of pre-birth planning, as you can imagine, but there's a lot of very healing and helpful information there. And then the third book in the series, Your Soul's Love, that is specifically about the pre-birth planning of challenges specific to romantic relationships. So it's things like being single for a lifetime, infidelity, celibate relationships, and so on, the kinds of challenges you would have in a romantic relationship.
Yeah, what I find interesting about the work is that it lightens the load in terms of judging other people's experience. When, for example, if I look at my children or I look at experiences that people I know are having, it doesn't make me it makes me empathize with what they're experiencing, but it also makes me aware that since this information that you put forward is the light is shining on that, it gives me the understanding that we're here for a temporary time to work on something, and we will be back again. And what the person is experiencing at that moment is only a temporary in terms of time. Um, if I find myself seeking the most or receiving the most love, not only from humans, but more from pets.
Mhm.
And in this particular lifetime or this particular time in my life, I recognize that animals are coming closer to me, and specifically a dog that I have now. So, do pets serve as a reminder for us for unconditional love?
Then, as I understand it, is the main reason why they're here. In my second book, Your Soul's Gift, there's an entire chapter about the pre-birth planning we do with our future pets. And it's really a very touching story. It's about a soul who plans, for reasons we won't go into right now, it would take too long, but she plans to be a dwarf in this lifetime. She's 4 feet 8 inches tall. So she puts that plan in place. And then in her pre-birth planning session, her spirit guides say to her, well, this is going to be extremely challenging for you, especially when you're a child, because you will be so much smaller than the other children. They're going to tease and ostracize you. We need to put supports in place to get you through this very difficult experience. And the plan they come up with is that she will be surrounded by all kinds of pets who will love her unconditionally through that experience. And then these future pets come into her pre-birth planning session. There are dogs, there are cats, there's a horse, there's even a rooster named Crooked Beak, and they speak with tremendous intelligence about how they will love her unconditionally through that experience. And that's exactly the way it worked out. When she was a little child, she would come home in tears because the other kids were teasing her so relentlessly. And she had the ability to speak telepathically with these animals. So the horse, for example, would say to her, okay, you've had a really hard day, climb on my back and let's go ride like the wind. And they just loved her and loved her and loved her, and they got her through it.
Yeah. Uh, one interesting concept that I've thought about, in terms of asking you, or it's always running through my mind, and we look to our ancestors or the deceased ones that have passed on as support for our, guiding us in terms of giving us insight and being in our presence in the spiritual realm, and yet when they reincarnate, they are obviously out of spirit now into a human form. Is there any concept or understanding of what takes place in terms of, like, let's say, praying to your grandmother who passed on but now is reincarnated on the human plane?
Yeah, consciousness, we now understand through physics, is non-local in nature, meaning that a consciousness of being can be in more than one place in space-time. So your loved one can be back on the other side in the form of their higher self, and yet still incarnate as another personality on Earth in another time period. And this is why when people cross over after an incarnation on Earth, they're greeted by their loved ones from this lifetime, even though many of those loved ones have actually already reincarnated. Their consciousness is non-local, it's over there, and it's also over here.
Relating to a personal story for myself, I have a friend who has a friend, as I mentioned earlier, whose son was paralyzed in a football game. 14-year-old boy. My friend, I communicate with him on a daily basis. I spoke to him about you and the work you do in terms of better understanding that it's something that he planned prior to this incarnation. In terms of understanding or explaining it in a different way, or maybe more elaborate, maybe you can just touch upon that. We spoke a little bit about before in terms of planning our lives, but is there a specific reason for a paralysis in terms of being not being able to move at all and to be just debilitated completely?
Well, I don't know if your friend has read this part of Your Soul's Plan, but in the accidents chapter, we go into great detail about the pre-birth planning of somebody who had a diving accident in this lifetime and is now a quadriplegic. There could be many, many reasons for planning this. If we talk about it in terms of the divine virtues, which virtues could you cultivate as a result of going through an experience like that? Well, if you're the person who was paralyzed in the football game, it's a powerful opportunity and motivator to cultivate faith and trust in spirit and the universe. Now, that's a risky plan because it could also go in the other direction and you could lose faith and trust, although you can then regain it later in life. For both the person who's paralyzed and all their loved ones, it's a powerful opportunity and motivator to open your heart and give and receive love more unconditionally. You could cultivate compassion or self-compassion and many others. Those are just the first ones that come to mind. And then in terms of other reasons for planning something like that, certainly it could involve a karmic balancing of some kind. Perhaps you caused somebody to be paralyzed in a past life. But it's important to point out here, if that's the case, you're not being punished by being paralyzed. You yourself would have planned that experience because you decided, oh, I want to really understand what I caused this other person to experience. It would be your choice.
Yeah, I mean there are experiences that people have from past lives which they're associated with something either negative or that brings upon shame or guilt. But yet it may in this lifetime be a remnant of something that draws interest to them. And maybe that shame and guilt creates a conflict of the inability to actually bring it to the surface to actually work through or deal with. And I can relate that to myself personally in terms of working in a concentration camp and living a life, having a Jewish mother and a Christian father, and being close to the Jewish religion, and then having remnants of desiring to go to Germany, to live in Germany, which I did and speak German fluently within 5 months. So for me, it was balancing something from the past and also dealing with the reality of what took place or what existed. And actually feeling like caught between two worlds and actually living in the past. I mean, sometimes there are people who have a hard time of shedding that skin, even though they came here to work on those issues. And I guess that would be remnants or parts of what you're discussing.
Yeah, the one thing I'll add to what you just said, shame and guilt are not positive emotions, and they're sort of like energetic chains that tie you to a particular experience, and then that energy has to be dissolved either in that lifetime or in another lifetime. But the growth itself is accomplished through positive emotions, not negative ones like shame or guilt. If you're feeling shame or guilt about anything, you want to do whatever you can to let go of that.
Yeah, I would say other people would shame as opposed to me actually
Okay.
feeling that. Yeah. In terms of your workshops, you have various workshops that you offer. Maybe you could discuss those a little bit.
Sure. So there's a workshop called Awakening to Your Life Purpose, Discovering Your Life Plan. It's done both as a 1-day and a 2-day workshop, and both of those are coming up. The one-day workshop is a group Between Lives Soul Regression. The two-day workshop is a group Between Lives Soul Regression plus Divine Virtues plus the Contact of Deceased Loved One regression. And then there are other workshops on completely different topics. We're just starting a higher self workshop one day in October. We're going to talk about what the higher self is, how to connect more fully and deeply with your higher self. And then there will be a guided meditation to help people do that. We have another new workshop that we've done once and are doing again later this year for a second time called Star Souls. So my wife is a channel, and she channels a collective of non-physical beings that we call the beings of light. And something they have shared with us is that there are many, many people on Earth who come from a very far away society or civilization. And it's generally a much more highly evolved civilization. Sometimes the term that is used for this is star soul. Sometimes the term is wanderer, meaning they wandered to Earth. So a star soul or a wanderer often feels out of place on Earth. They feel very different from everybody else. They think that humans do a lot of things that really don't make a whole lot of sense. Sometimes they see the world as being barbaric in a number of ways. So if the people listening to this conversation, if you have ever thought or felt any of those things, there's a good chance that you are a star soul. So in the Star Souls workshop, which is one day, we use a hypnotic induction that was actually channeled by the beings of light through my wife. It's similar in intention to the induction I use for the Between Lives regression, but the wording is completely different. And essentially what it does is it helps you to become aware of your intergalactic origins. And it will help you to answer questions like, where did I come from originally? Why did I come to Earth? What are my unique gifts and talents and qualities as a star soul? How can I best offer those unique gifts and talents and qualities to the world? Those are the sorts of questions we're answering in the Star Souls workshop. So all of this information is on the events page at yoursoulsplan.com. Just click the links to get through to another page that will have details for each workshop.
Yeah, I'm very interested in myself in intergalactic communication in terms of looking up into the universe, not just down on the earth. And in terms of shamanism, which I practice or I'm very interested in, spoken to many shamans who speak about their encounters with different alien groups in the Andes Mountains on a daily basis of making contact and seeing the earth from their own ships, taking them to different places and the different connections that exist and the waterways that are underground. But as you speak about, opening up or cracking the nut open and developing the ability to go beyond what we know. And once you start investigating, the subjects you talk about, the universe is endless in terms of information. One of the subjects that we didn't talk about that I was interested in is rebirth while incarnate. In terms of being rebirth in an incarnate in our lives, in terms of having a near-death experience, having the karma that we worked on or the planning that we did, but then all of a sudden certain things may shift because of a particular incident.
Well, if you're talking specifically about near-death experiences, those are planned by those people before they're born. And they're planned to catalyze the kind of major shift that you just described. So the people who come back from a near-death experience, they often move in a completely new and different direction in life. Generally, as I understand it, their priorities change quite a bit, and perhaps they were very materialistically oriented before the NDE, and now that doesn't interest them at all. They're focused on spiritual growth and service to others. A near-death experience is a profoundly life-altering experience. People remember to different degrees what happened while they were on the other side. And that also is intentional. That's something that they discuss with their non-physical guidance team when they're back there. How much will they get to remember? And if it's important for what they're going to do in terms of work and service for the rest of that incarnation, they'll be gifted with memory that allows them to do that.
Yeah, so it definitely is an interesting process. Maybe you just want to give us a little insight on what you're planning for the future in terms of, other than the workshops. Is there anything you'll be working on?
Well, I do want to mention we have a number of international workshops that are done in English and another language. So for those who speak Polish, Spanish, or German, we will have workshops later this year in those languages. And I'm working on a fourth book also about pre-birth planning. I'm not quite sure exactly yet what topics I'm going to cover, but Spirit will guide me. I know that. And my wife is collaborating on the book with me, which has turned out to be a real joy for both of us and a very unexpected blessing. You know, when we first met, she was not channeling at all. This really just started about 2 years ago. And now she's a full partner in all the work that I'm doing. And she and the beings of light participate in the workshops. The beings of light often speak through her and comment on the experiences people have in the Between Lives Soul Regression. So that has really been a wonderful thing, and we're both very happy to be working together.
Yeah, I assume you find the work that you do rewarding.
Tremendously so. I mean, I actually have a folder in which I store every positive email somebody sends me for any reason. And there are a lot of emails in there now, and I know that I will look those over at some point and feel that this was a life well spent. It's very gratifying.
Yeah, I just want to thank you so much for sharing this information. It's rewarding for me to be able to be in contact with someone who has this mindset, and to be able to share the information with the audience that is familiar with this, but also is also interested in getting on the path. Just if you can just leave us with your website and where people can reach you.
Yeah, the website is yoursoulsplan.com. Go to the contact page and use that if you'd like to get a message to me. Again, all the workshops are on the events page. There are pages for each of the books where you can read large portions of each book for free. And the email address is rob.schwartz, SCHWARTZ, at yoursoulsplan.com.
Okay, so I want to thank you very much for being here today, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.